This tune is incredible. Some of Ringo's most interesting and intricate drumming. For those of you that like to stick around and listen to all my yammering, buckle up. This one's going to be a bit long. There's a lot to say about this. I want to point out why I think this is just sheer brilliance. There are those people throughout history that really create vocabulary, and that is what Ringo is doing here on this tune. Meaning, like, no one really did this before them. And that's, just with drummers, there are all kinds of ways that that's manifest. You can see, like, maybe when Gene Krupa was doing his stuff with Benny Goodman's band, like this. Like, he's creating some vocabulary there, doing something that really hadn't been done. And there's a lot of drummers, jazz drummers, tons of them that really created stuff. Philly Joe Jones and Max Roach, lots of people. There's lots of rock drummers that have done it. That's one reason I think John Bonham's got a super legitimate claim to greatest rock drumming, the way he elevated it and just added so much to what rock drumming is. Or Neil Peart. Ringo, though, has the same claim right here. He's doing stuff that's really just never been done. And this is one tune where you can really say his left-handedness had a lot to do with that. This whole tune pretty much is left hand style stuff. Now there's one fill I have to start with my right hand to make it work. Every other thing he plays, all those notes, you have to use left hand. If you think of music as a language, you have certain terms that you use when you express yourself. When you put things into your own words, to steal an idea from Benny Greb, to paraphrase Benny Greb, you don't make up words, you don't make up sounds. You use sounds that are part of the language, but the ones that are familiar and good for you. Ringo was using stuff that was familiar and that existed, but in a way no one had really done before. So, like what I was just doing with the Gene Krupa thing, there's a lot of, I guess, not just alternating. So if you just alternate your sticks, you have one thing. If you use double or triple stickings, though, that's when you can get, like, your paradiddles. Right? You get all kinds of vocabulary that can come up when you start doing that. And that goes back way before drum set was invented. Many of your standard rudiments that came from militaristic drumming, pipe bands, John Philip Sousa's drummers, Revolutionary War drummers, just probably drumming from all around the world was already incorporating, all kinds of like doubles and bounces and smashed strokes and buzzes, multiple bounce, triple bounce, just all kinds of stuff. When you have just one thing, just a snare drum, and that's all you do, you get really creative with how you can make it musical and how you can get variety. Ringo goes back to just not doing any of that. And maybe this is why some people, get on that train of Ringo's not good because he didn't do that. Whatever. Like, I don't really care whether he could or not, or whether it was a conscious choice to do it or not. He did this thing that worked for him in a way no one had done, and he creates vocabulary and does awesome stuff that just no one else can really do. I'm doing my best impersonation. I have listened to this tune so much. I have worked so much on the feel and the style, and I know that it's not a great copy. Like, no one can do it the way he does it. So to have it be your way in your style with vocabulary no one's ever done, to me that's innovation, and that puts him on a high level for me. The musicians throughout history that can do that, that can really create vocabulary and influence everything after it because of the way they did it, are the ones that are the real innovators, the real artists, the real creators. And Ringo is doing that really, really strongly in this tune. Now, it helps that John Lennon's tune is so weird. It provides a great palette for him to stretch out and experiment with all that. So yay Beatles, right? They're the greatest. But yeah, Ringo, the point is Ringo came up with this stuff, and it's just incredible. So part of Ringo's vocabulary, and one thing he does really effectively, is the use of accents. So again, if you're a drummer, this is second nature. But for those of you that may not be aware, I just want to explain this point. When you have, say, one instrument like a snare drum, and you don't have pitch, you get really creative with the dynamics. One thing you have is dynamic variety in spades. You have the ability to get super quiet, right? At the same time, this like that's like hurts my ears to do that. So there's just a massive range. So one thing you do as a drummer to create musical interest is you put those accents in there. So for instance, I could have a string of notes like this, and then I could play an accent pattern. And I'm going to do this thinking of a little bit of a song. Maybe I'll keep time here. That is musical. There's phrasing and there's a melodic idea. Now, I don't have pitch, but that's okay. In Western music, it evolved that pitch was the thing. If you go all the way back to, plain chant, Gregorian chant, pitch was the thing. Rhythm is boring. And rhythmic evolution doesn't really happen. We get to Mozart and it's like incredible harmonic interest, the way we're using pitch and scales and all these things. The rhythmic interest in Mozart is like zero. um, Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, like in India, they're doing the opposite. And I'm not an expert at Indian music, but their scales and their melodies and their harmonic interest was much less than it was in the Western world. But their rhythm systems are incredible and they're super, super complex. And they're so different than what those of us in the Western world grow up with when we hear our popular music or our classical music. It's just so, so different. It's amazing how those two things can be worlds apart. The point is, as a drummer, to me, that's musical. And it may not sound musical to everybody because it doesn't have pitch. But when I'm playing that, I'm thinking of the ABCs. So if you couldn't tell, go back and listen to it. You can sing ABCs along with what I'm playing with the accent pattern, and you can hear how it's a melodic idea. So that's one thing Ringo is doing, and he does to great effect. He uses these accents. It's not just a matter of every time I hit it, I'm just hitting it this loud or whatever. There's notes that are louder and notes that are softer in very purposeful ways. And he just kind of creates that in a way that's just amazing. And it seems like he can just really improvise that. He can just go for it, and a lot of people can't. Even with something as simple as just alternating and putting in accent patterns, it's it you don't have to go too long before you just screw up, before you run out of an idea. You had something and then it leaves you and you stutter and you get out of time, you whatever. Ringo seems to have just this endless fountain of these accent pattern type ideas, and he fits them in so nicely with how his hands want to go on the toms. That's just not that simple or easy to do. Now, maybe for some people out there, yes, but this was just second nature to Ringo, and the way he does it is really just super artistic and wonderful. And things like that, those accent patterns and that type of vocabulary tend to get drummers pretty excited. Like I love the drums. I love the sound of the drums. I love what they are and what they do and how they work. And I love those types of ideas and how I can make them work on the instrument. Being that our society generally has such importance with pitch and a melodic, pitch creating melodies, this isn't always that appreciated or understood. So we give, Paul McCartney and John Lennon and George Harrison a lot of credit for their tunes, the melodies they came up with, their of course their lyrics and different things like that. We don't often give drummers as a society a lot of credit for some of the interesting ideas they came up with that are just as musical, even though there's not pitch. And that's kind of a personal soapbox thing, I'll say. And drummers get treated like a bit of a second class citizen a lot of the time because of that. Like, hey, you go in the corner and you hit on your thing over there, and just bang your drum, and we'll go here and do the real the real music. So kids over there and grown ups over here, kind of thing. I don't agree with that concept. Any drummer that's worth his weight will have a a great grasp of what's going on with the entire song, the entire ensemble, how his instrument fits in and how it supports all that. And I think, as everybody knows and agrees, Ringo was just a master at that, at helping the overall big picture end result be better, how he could lift it up and support it and just make it better. And that's, of course, one of the things that makes Ringo Ringo. So let's get into a little bit about the left-handed stuff. So for those that may not be aware, let me just explain that by, okay, so I'm right-handed. I because of that dominant right hand feel, I tend to want to start a lot of stuff with my right hand. When I just want to play a phrase, hey, play this. I want to start with my right hand. That just feels the most natural. And then when I start that way, I like to find a way to end that way. Like that feels really good to just end with the right hand too. And for Ringo, it was the opposite. So he could have played on a left-handed setup to where the setup I get right now with left hand, where I go with right hand, where I go like high to low, leading with my right hand. Ringo could have set up his drums that way, but he didn't. He stayed with this right hand setup. And he, if you look around at the videos online of Ringo explaining this to him in his sort of happy-go-lucky way, uncomplicated way, I should say, he says, oh yeah, I was left-handed, so I couldn't do that. I couldn't go like this. So I had to figure out a way that I could do it, starting with the left. If I try to do that with the left, you get a logistics problem. You can't physically always just do what you want. You have to find these stickings that like facilitate moving around the drum set. So that's what Ringo does here. He finds ways that do that. So let me point out like for instance, this fill right here, 2, 3, 4. That is so cool. I would never have thought of that because I'm not left-handed. I would not have started that with the left hand, and therefore I would not have had that strong note on the floor tom, the 16th right after beat 3, the E of 3 if you want. That's just something that would never have come up. The whole tune is like that. There's all kinds of things that would never have entered my mind just because I don't think that way. I have a way of thinking that helps me do what I want to do to support the tune, and that's what I focus on. And this vocabulary just doesn't come up. Now, I don't think that Ringo's brilliance is just because he's left-handed. And there's a lot of that. And I want to be really clear about this point, because that's like the cliche answer. Oh, Ringo's left-handed, so that's why he does what he does. And I think that's fueled by Ringo, because he says that. You can find any number of interviews where he just says, oh, they thought I was a genius, but I was just left-handed. And he's being a little glib. If you don't know that, he is, trust me. There's way more sophistication and artistry to what he's doing than just, I'm left-handed. So yes, I acknowledge he's left-handed and that plays a big part in this tune, but it's way, way more than that. There's the feel. So let's talk about the feel. Now, I thought a lot about this. It's also generally accepted, widely talked about, that Ringo was swinging, had this sense of swing when he played. So let's just define that a little bit. To people like me who are really analytical, who are left-brained, and they try to define everything that goes on, you have a straight feel. So, for instance, straight eighth notes sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect evenness. You want to have perfect evenness between all those notes. Swinging is sort of triplet based. So in that same tempo, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. And academically speaking, that's what it is. Straight eighth notes or swinging eighth notes. And swinging eighth notes, of course, we're going to talk about jazz and how jazz is swinging. When people say swing, they mean a lot more than just triplet based. Yes, Ringo had triplet based feel. And rock is born out of that. Jazz came first, and jazz was triplet based or swinging feel. And the first rock drummers and the first rock tunes, everything is triplet based. Think of like Bill Haley and the Comets, Rock Around the Clock. Like everything is a triple based. Even if they're not playing that, you can fit this. And on top of that, you had chunga dinga dinga, chunka 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 on the guitar, or ba 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 ba, fast triplets on the piano. Something that just really tied it strongly back to jazz. So yes, Ringo keeps that swing in that sense, but he also has this maybe other kind of swing that we could define as just not perfectly in time. Growing up, I did a lot of rudimental drumming. And when you focus on rudimental drumming, which is like drumline style stuff, marching band style stuff, when you do that, you play in a large group. So if there are 9 snare drummers and we're all playing the same lick, our goal is to play it so in time, metronomically and mathematically in time, that we all know exactly what to shoot for, and that when we play it, it sounds like one drummer is playing. There's more to it than that, but that's a lot of times, just in a nutshell, that's the goal. So I have spent a ton of time trying to play perfectly mathematically in time. And that just really is not necessary at all on the drum set. That's one thing about this instrument. When you are the drummer in a band, you don't have to have that same metronomic awareness. Yes, you have to play in time. I'm not saying you don't have to play in time, but you have to play in time within the overall big picture of things. The general scope of what you do needs to be in time. All the individual little things don't have to be in time. So within this quarter note pulse, whether I keep it really straight or really swinging, like wherever all those notes line up, like it can change from quarter note to quarter note or from bar to bar. It doesn't really matter if my quarter note pulse is good and my overall time is good. And so Ringo's got that going on like crazy in this tune. And he has more of that than just about any other drummer I can think of. He's not the only one, but it's so strong with him. And I think that's real just, yeah, sheer brilliance. It's just pure talent that he just does the way he feels it, and it comes out, it sounds so perfectly. It's just so natural. That's just not a better word than that's just talent. The overall feel is just so awesome, and that has nothing to do with him being left-handed. So for everybody who thinks that, like, sorry, you can roast me, whatever, but I completely disagree. His feel, his sense of swing, his ability to kind of blur the lines of where the time is, has nothing to do with him being left-handed. It's something else. Yes, he's left-handed, and yes, all the cool fill vocabulary stems from him being left-handed in this one. But his brilliance is much more than just him being left-handed. So, regardless of what he says all kinds of things, and he even demonstrates some stuff. This is what I did, and it's just not what he did. So maybe he's just trolling everybody. Maybe he just wants to make it seem like he's more of a simpleton than he is. I don't know. I don't know why he's so just not straightforward about it. He just makes it sound like no big deal. Maybe that's just another reason you can tell that it's just like pure talent. He's just not thinking about it or trying, and it just happens so perfectly and so uniquely, just amazingly. It's just really, really cool. So a few more things I want to say about some of the Ringoisms. In other videos, I have referred to the fact that there's more to hitting a drum than just hitting it. There's different ways you can hit it. So one thing, for those of you that are not aware, is called a rim shot. This is where you get the bead on the head, and at the same time, you get the shaft of the stick on the rim. When you hit those two together, you get a rim shot. So with no rim shot, sounds one way. If I start to add rim in there, that's when I get that. So you can have fills like, hopefully you can hear really clearly how those are different. So that's a really subtle thing that just takes, skill to get just right when you want it all the time with consistency. It's very hard to do. There's a lot of that going on here. There are times when there's rim shots. There's a bunch on this tom, and there's few on the snare drum, and that's really cool. Ringo does that in a lot of the tunes, where I think there's specific times where he wants rim shots and times when he doesn't. And I don't think he gets enough credit for that. And I don't know if people who aren't drummers know that that's a thing. Like, so maybe you can help me out in the comments, but he's doing a bunch of that this tune. And if you didn't notice, maybe go back and check it, or you can listen to the drums only version that I'll post, and you can just hear sometimes when you hear that extra ringing and sharpness too, this tom, it's because he's catching the rim when he's hitting it. His hi-hat. So this was maybe one of the most mysterious things about this recording. I do think that there's a bunch of overdubs on this, and I don't claim to know exactly what was going on, but I am guessing he is doing some left foot hi-hat notes in this tune. And I'm guessing that there's no like timekeeping on the hi-hat. I have read from sources I trust that there is. When he goes to that bridge part, I was playing something like this, right? I'm being really purposeful with having this hi-hat be just a tiny smidge ahead of the beat. If you listen to the recording, that's how Ringo does it. I don't know why exactly. And I thought about other possibilities. Maybe he's not doing that, or maybe he's doing this. But it can't be that because sometimes I hear this when I know he's going like this. I know he's not hurrying and like fitting in a quick like that and then like doing like two or three lefts in a row to get that in there. Ringo just doesn't really do that. It's with his foot, I think. I also considered maybe it's shaker because I've read in some accounts that there's shaker in there. I really just can't hear it though. But I thought maybe there's shaker. And maybe the reason it sounds a little bit early is because shaker is such an imprecise instrument. And when you start to get motion to shake the thing, you get a little bit of sound before the main thrust of the sound. I just don't think it is though. The type of sound is not shaker in my opinion. I thought also maybe it's just post-production overdub weirdness, just frequencies of sound that they're putting in there. I don't think it's that though. After a lot of listening and considering, I really think he's using left foot, and I think you can tell for sure because of the way that it fits in with his hands. It's not common for Ringo to keep left foot time throughout a tune. So it's very much an instinct for me to keep that going, like to do this. Like keeping that going on 2 and 4 all the time is pretty normal, especially, when you play jazz, that's just like a given most of the time. Ringo doesn't really do that throughout his rock drumming hardly at all. And I kind of think here's another one where the internet is probably going to kill me for this, stone me or whatever. But I kind of think he was going for that. And lots of times when it got busier, he didn't want to keep that up or couldn't. He just didn't have that in his vocabulary to continue doing this while he was doing those busy fills, which is fine. I think you can find the places where, like right after a crash, lots of time, there's not one of those notes. Blah, 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 fill, 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 fill. It comes in on the fourth beat of the bar, not the second beat. Not all the time, but many times it's not there. And I think it's because he has just done a thing and it takes him a sec to get back to like, yeah, I'll add that back in. And then some of the fills, yeah, it just, the way that the notes fit, I'm almost positive it's his left foot. It's possible that they overdubbed all that hi-hat in later, but if so, why do it where it was? Why not have it more consistent? It's just so haphazard and so seemingly random unless you look at it in the context of where all the busy notes are. Then it feels to me like it's clearly his left foot. So that's my take on that. I don't know how popular of an opinion that is, but I know I trust what I hear. And I mentioned that I read that there's timekeeping on the hi-hat. I I just can't hear it. What I can hear the first time they get to that bridge, I can still hear this happening. The time signature's getting all weird and crazy. That's whatever it is, but this stays every other quarter through that. And then you even hear one open hi-hat note in there. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And that's so random. That's like the one time all song where he hits the hi-hat with his stick, feels like to me. So that's my opinion. I really think it's left foot hi-hat going on there. Take it for what it's worth. I really do think Ringo's just such an innovator. There's so much brilliance with his creation of vocabulary here. He did things here that influenced so many drummers, and he did it in a way that had never been done. It's just really a brilliant performance. Some people I have read call this his greatest bit of drumming of his entire career. I don't quite take it there. I'll put it up pretty high, but I'll save that award for Strawberry Fields Forever, probably. But I love this. It's just so awesome. It's so Ringo-ish. There's so much here to learn about, and this is one where I could just study it forever and try to get the feel, and I could just never copy it exactly like him, which is fine. I'll do it my way and do the best I can to learn from what Ringo did, and I hope you like my way just fine. And yeah, this one was a real fun one, real great tune. Long live the Beatles. Ringo Starr is the man. Catch you on the next one.